Hello and welcome, and a very happy Independence Day to all our listeners and viewers, and a happy Independence Day to you too, Abhishek. We are
Happy
recording
Independence
a
Day,
day
Dev.
later, by the way, on
Yes, a
16th.
day later, and unlike most of the people that we know, we were not off.
Yeah, we were
we,
not
we we don't have the luxury of extended weekends either.
during national holidays. It was the other way around for us actually. We had to come early to office because of the
Yeah, I
Prime
mean, I
Minister's
didn't
speech.
come that much early to office, but the day started a little earlier
Yeah,
because you have to listen to the speech.
yeah,
Isn't it?
yeah. So yeah, busy week, busy few days,
Yes.
and it was a good speech. I thought. I won't go into the good as in it was an interesting one. I'll just
Well, you'd
rephrase it.
expect Prime Minister like Mr. Modi to give interesting speeches.
Yeah,
I think.
definitely,
Yeah.
and quite. I think you'll agree with me that he did sound the poll bugle.
Of
Considering
course, I
this
mean,
is his
he
last
doesn't need
speech before
the
next year's election.
Independence Day
Two,
Red Fort ramparts of Red Fort
yeah,
to be sounding the poll bugle.
definitely.
I think the speeches in Parliament by both the Home Minister and the Prime Minister
Mm.
were also,
Oh, definitely.
signaling
Yeah,
what's going to happen in the next few
Mm.
months. The kind of discourse, rhetoric. Yeah, I mean, that's expected.
yeah. So pretty much the election season is on us.
Yeah.
So I mean, pretty
Uh,
exciting times for
the
us.
BJP is like the Australian cricket team of the 90s and of the 2000s, ruthless.
Yeah.
Or the West Indian team of the
Oh yes.
70s and 80s.
Mm.
No scope for anybody, any inch
Mm.
to get back.
Yeah.
If they feel that they are doing well, they'll
Yeah.
even go whole hog,
Mm.
to consolidate that.
Mm.
So it's like that. So completely unexpected lines.
Yeah. And just to clarify, for everyone, I think what he means, Abhishek, is not as much as he means more on the lines of how relentless the party is when it
Yeah,
comes
yeah,
to
yeah.
election issues, and it's not as though you support
There
the
are no
BJP
there are no
or
let
don't.
ups. There are no let ups. No, this is my opinion.
Yeah,
It's
of
not a
course.
question of
Yeah,
support.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I want to clarify.
Support or non-support. Yeah.
Non-support,
It's
exactly.
just an observation that anybody can make.
Yeah. Any
Yeah,
person who observes Indian politics
yeah,
will definitely that BJP of the last 10 years,
yeah.
not 10 years, I think last at least 6, 7, 8 years.
Yeah, I mean, 10 years you can say since
When it
they
comes to
came back.
elections, they
Yeah.
just do not give any inch to anybody. So that's that. So speaking of giving inches, and just once again, did not plan this, by the way, not scripted at all, just so happened. Segue, giving inches of land, something that we discuss so often on this podcast in our defense. Let's go back once again to China. And this time I'm going to turn the tables a bit. I don't know if our producer will like this, but I'm going to stop playing the host for a few seconds. I'm going to let Abhishek introduce the topic of this week's episode, because this is actually a story that he himself wrote and kind of broke earlier this week. So, what are we talking about, Abhishek, this week?
Before I get into that, there's a good little story that it's just come to mind because
Acha.
we were discussing Independence Day.
Huh.
I mean, I spent all day literally watching a beautiful, beautiful video
Hmm.
that was going viral. And I played it on loop, shared it with my mother, my wife, showed it to my kids. And since we are talking uniform in our defense, this young Sikh soldier,
Hmm.
he comes back probably after his training or something to his home. And you must watch that video. And if it's possible, we can ask Anna to maybe
Play a clip or
have
something, or a link
an
or something.
embed
Yeah.
or something of that video. Young guy reaches his home. It's obviously somewhere in Punjab, and he marches up to his elders.
Hmm.
They are at the gate, welcoming him, and he salutes. And that crisp baritone voice, he does a Jai Hind Saab to all the elders,
Okay.
from his grandparents to maybe parents, uncles, aunts, whoever was there. So lovely video. I mean, it was the perfect video to be seen on Independence Day.
Wow.
And a lot of veterans were sharing it as well.
Acha.
I also got it on one of the groups that I am, where there are a lot of veterans. So I thought it's important to mention.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
It's a lovely thought. We'll see if we can have a link to the
Yeah,
video in the description of the show. So yeah, talking about this week's episode, like I said, explain and tell us why are we going to talk about what are we going to talk about.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, because the 19th round of the co-commander level
Just
talks
happened,
happened And on expected lines, nothing has moved forward.
I'm tired of those statements, by the way. Just like, boilerplate.
They're useless. I mean,
Yeah,
it
exactly.
doesn't mean anything. And it's a stalemate. Let's face it, it's a stalemate. I think this dialogue is done to make sure that there are no further escalations,
Hmm.
to sort of douse the fire.
Achha.
Every 3-4 months, you have some kind of a discussion to make sure that you don't want a repeat of what happened in 2020,
Hmm.
where there were clashes. Galwan happened. There was an incident of firing, which obviously has been denied, but
Hmm.
yeah, it did happen. We all know.
So this is like about ensuring the stalemate remains a
Yes,
stalemate,
yeah,
basically.
yeah. And although the Indian side talks about Depsang Plains, Demchok, the Chinese are not budging. They say that this has nothing to do with uh, what happened in 2020, the standoff 2020. This predates that standoff as far as the friction points were concerned, 4, 5 friction points. Disengagement has happened there. And then we talk about places, petrol points where we are blocked. We cannot go because the Chinese uh, are holding on to those positions. Again, the Chinese are not very forthcoming and they say predates the 2020 standoff. So yeah, I mean, they lead nowhere. So it's the 19th round. 4 months down the line, there'll be the 20th, there'll be the 21st, 22nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. We don't know. But in the middle of all this, there was an interesting uh, news break
Yes.
that we happened to do, and which was about India finally, uh, moving ahead with plans to set up a new fighter airbase
Mm.
in Ladakh in a place called Nyoma. Now, there is an airfield in Nyoma. Transport aircraft do operate out of there. Helicopter operations have happened. In fact, at the peak of that tussle in 2020, when a lot of logistics were being sent to forward areas, the Indian Air Force used their transport aircraft, the Chinook helicopters. Also, the Apache combat helicopters were deployed and they were operating out of there. So Apache is a combat helicopter, so when one would get the sense that our deployments as far as air assets was concerned was extremely offensive. And finally, the project is moving forward, and hopefully in the next year or a little over a year, you'll have Rafale, Su-30s, or whatever fighter aircraft you want to operate from there. As the cliche goes, a game changer. Well, yes, certainly a game changer because it just gives you flexibility. Currently, the Indian Air Force has 2 fighter air bases in Ladakh. One is Thoise and the other is Leh. It's not as if flying from Leh and reaching the forward locations takes a lot of time. It's a matter of
It's a
few
fighter
minutes.
jet.
It's a matter of a few minutes. But it's just the range and the flexibility that your fleet has with a fighter airbase about 40-50 kilometers away from the LAC. And worst case scenario, if there happens to be a war, that time further comes down to respond. And see, there has been a series of events that has led to the Indian defense establishment finally taking this decision. And some of those events were, in 2020, 21, the Chinese Air Force ramped up its facilities closer to the border areas like anything. They either made new air bases or they upgraded their older ones, like the one that we are doing with Nyoma. That it felt that they are up to something. Then there were several instances of, if we can call them, I don't know technically if they were air incursions or not, but yes, they flew very close
to the LAC.
To the LAC, and we had to scramble our jets. So this cat and mouse game was happening. So now, two things. One, a deterrent that we are extremely close. So the response time comes down considerably. The other is that your striking capabilities, since you are already closer to the LAC, your range of striking also enhances.
Yeah.
By the time, even if it takes 2, 3, 4 minutes, the moment you are airborne, you are in a position to strike
Yeah.
deep inside
Yeah.
within a matter of few seconds. So I think, I mean, to put that in a gist, that's what the thinking behind it is. And what I'm hearing is that very soon Defense Minister Rajnath Singh will himself go to
Go
Nyoma.
to the and check on the progress.
Yeah, check on the progress. And so it shows that, the top leadership is very keen on this kind of a project. And the other aspect is that everybody's talking theatre commands, and I don't know when will it happen, but there's definitely a big push to jointness, synergy within the forces. We saw that jointness again in 2020. I was there in 2020 in Ladakh when all this was happening. And there was a huge operation carried out by the Air Force, Army, just to ensure supplies, logistics. Forget about war fighting capabilities. You first need the war fighting machinery. And when we say war fighting machinery, it's not just military platforms, it's ration,
Yes.
it's sleeping bags, it's tents, Arctic tents that were brought in that can sustain that cold, clothing,
building material
because that was the first time you were going to have a deployment which was 3-4 times more of the usual deployment.
It's around 60,000 soldiers.
68,000 soldiers were airlifted by the Indian Air Force. These numbers have again recently come out. The accurate numbers: 68,000 additional, 100 odd tanks, 300 plus armored personnel carriers or infantry combat vehicles. In military parlance, they are called BMPs, the Russian infantry combat vehicles that we use. Basically, these are these are carriers where infantry men can get into and be transported closer to
like Humvees, I think, of the US Army.
They're slightly different from Humvees, and then they have a small gun as well. So that's why people sometimes mistake them for tanks. They are not tanks. So 300 plus artillery guns. So this whole gamut of infrastructure and machinery that was taken there has not been brought back. So you are in that war machinery mold even now, 3 years down the line. And with things like Nyoma, projects like Nyoma, today it's Nyoma, tomorrow it could be another airbase where we could have fighter capabilities. Who knows? There is another airbase called Fukche. Again, it doesn't have fighter capabilities. DBO, of course, all of us know, doesn't have fighter capabilities. But if the need be, see, this is at 13,700 feet. And it's an old airbase. It's not something that has come up right now. It's been there since 1962. So the basic facility is there. But to upgrade it for a fighter requires a lot of work. You need a better, longer runway. There was a problem of wildlife clearances, because when you expand that airbase, then you are getting into a reserved forest area. There's a wildlife sanctuary in the vicinity. So wildlife clearances were needed, which have been given now. So imagine the kind of paperwork that goes into, and which is fine, I mean, environment, forest, these are important things as well. And so even for something like the defense of the country, if you need to take these clearances, so be it. So all that has been done. So which gives you an indication that the government, the military, wants to work at this.
Yeah, the last thing you mentioned, I think that's one of the things I wanted to discuss with you when you said that you want to talk about this topic on this episode, and I wanted to expand on that. What does it take to set up a fighter jet airbase? I mean, just in pure layman's, like, for example, you mentioned longer runway. So apart from that, like the kind of infrastructure you need to have, for example, maintenance sheds, kind of housing you need to have for the
first of
people
all,
over there.
if you're going to have your fighter assets there, you need to make sure that if you have good defenses.
Defense system, exactly. Very precious,
Isn't
very expensive.
So, I mean, that's the foremost concern. Going back to the film Border, It
I
just struck me right now. So this Air Force officer who's played by
Jackie Shroff.
Jackie Shroff,
Yeah.
he tells
Sunny Deol.
Sunny Deol, who plays Major Chandpuri,
Yeah.
Kuldeep Chandpuri, MVC by the way, 71, that we have to start from scratch
Hmm.
and build an airbase. And you chaps are lucky. You have the BSF there. You just have to go and take over.
Take over. Yeah.
But we have to start from scratch. So in war there's also a concern that your airfields will be struck first.
Hmm.
So if you're building something new and it's visible to the enemy,
Yeah.
they would want to hit that first. So it's a double whammy. You want to work quickly to make sure that you have a base which can operate fighters, but there's also a concern that these places will be hit first.
Hit first.
So this is peacetime. It's not
Hmm.
war. So it's the right time to upgrade and enhance
Hmm.
your facilities. To put it in a very basic manner, that's what it takes. You need to ensure that you have good safeguards in case there is an offensive against you. And of course, it should have all the bare minimum requirements for a fighter aircraft to land and take off,
Hmm.
and to simply put. But defenses is even
This is
more
more
important.
Actually, yeah, that makes a lot more.
So you need to have your air defenses accordingly,
Hmm.
Deployed there. Surveillance, of course, is another aspect.
Hmm.
And that's the reason why, the Heron Mark II
Will be deployed.
are also being deployed now in these places. And Heron Mark II, again, an Israeli UAV drone, has combat capabilities as well.
Hmm.
So it's not just surveillance that you are wanting to enhance. You are sending a message of deterrence that, okay, not just a new fighter airbase, but we are also getting combat capable drones here.
Hmm.
So it's showing the full picture. Sometimes telling the adversary what we have and what we are capable of doing is part of those mind games.
Yeah.
And that's what is happening, because that's exactly what China was doing about 2 years back, when they were enhancing and upgrading their air bases, not just in Aksai Chin across Ladakh, but even in other sectors, even across Arunachal, even across Uttarakhand.
Hmm.
I had done a story showing about 16, 17 air bases that they are ramping
Yes, I
up,
remember that one. Yeah.
with a map we had done. So I think we're trying to catch up. Of course, one air base versus 16, 17 sounds like a very one-sided kind of a contest. But even one air base, fighter air base, makes a difference.
Yeah, I mean, with China, we've always been trying to catch up. I mean,
Yes,
even if you
yes,
go
true,
back to
true.
20, 25
Yeah,
years ago,
yeah.
when I was a kid, and when I used to read reports about what India was doing at the border, it was mostly to like building a road, for example,
Yeah.
building some normal civilian infrastructure just to like help the military move in those areas. Part of the reason people believe the 2020 standoff happened in the first place, because China was not very happy with what India was doing. And there's been a contrasting change in the news reports that I read now. It's all to do with just what the Indian military is sending. They're sending. Like you said a few minutes ago, that none of it is coming back. You're just sending more people. You're sending
Yeah.
more
And
equipment.
none of it will come back.
None of
Believe
it
me,
will come back.
it
Yeah, I
won't.
mean, rotation might happen
No,
obviously
of
for
course,
maintenance purposes.
rotation
Obviously.
is important in terms of troops.
Yeah,
It's important, but all
but
the
it's as though the military has resolved and realized that this is it. This is the new normal.
sometimes I feel that the Indian military is not too unhappy about it either.
Acha.
That because of this,
They finally got
they
perhaps
finally got what their
what
demands were, or at
were.
least they are on the right track.
Because yeah, you're right. Because again, if I go back to the earlier years, there were always these odd reports from here and there, either from most of them outside the government, from like a strategic group somewhere or like a think tank somewhere, of why India needs to do more along the LAC because of the threat that China has. And the general perception was that either those were being ignored or the issue was on like second, third, fourth priority level. Like, theek hai, haan, China threat is there, but we have larger issue concern. Back then, it was Pakistan bashing, for example. But I see what you mean, because in a way, I think the Ladakh standoff,
That silver
was
lining.
was like
Silver
the kind of the
lining for
kick
the-
that was needed for everything to kind of come together.
Yeah.
The government was like, "Acha, okay, take it, do it." The jointness that you said
Yeah,
has happened, and it's good you mentioned that, because before you, I mean, when you did, it just struck me that, yeah, you're so right about that. This is that one operation
Hmm.
where I've not heard or come across any incident that would make you question, or like, those stories you have of internal rivalries between different military wings, etc.
Hmm.
इस बार ऐसा हुआ नहीं. The impression that comes out of all reporting, I'm not just
No,
talking about
certainly
yours,
not. You
is
had at the peak of the tensions, uh, you had navies, PATIs,
Yeah.
operating in Ladakh.
and even their fighter jets, by the way.
You had MiG-29s, Ks.
Yeah,
So
the ones that operate.
it's if this is not jointness, what
Then what
is?
is? Yeah, exactly. Uh, on a tangent, uh, kind of to do with China, but because you mentioned border, it just came up to my mind. There was a report recently, I forgot by whom or in which publication, but something on the lines of what you reported, that the Air Force is still in a state of, I forgot the term, but something on the lines of they are
Offensive posture.
somehow offensive preparedness,
Yeah,
as in, like, we're ready to strike
Yeah,
from the moment you give. So I always thought about this. How does it work for the pilots? Is the border, if there's a scene that pilots are in a room, the set of pilots of the larger group, always someone is there, and sort of a bell rings, alarm rings, and this rush to their fighter jets, and suddenly they take off. Does it
we
happen
don't know
like
how
that?
does it happen because it's not happened.
But if it were to happen, they must
Something,
practice it, I
yeah.
mean.
And there are exercises, of
Huh,
course.
exactly.
Yeah. But coming back to your mentioning that we are in a state of offensive posture and offensive preparedness, I asked. I think it was the first press conference after the Ladakh standoff
Hmm.
of a military chief, and it was the Air Force chief,
Hmm.
then Air Force chief. So I asked him, were we close to? That was my question. Were we close to using air power?
Huh.
No, trying to grab a headline. His answer anyway made the headline. He said that we were prepared for it. So he answered my question. He very smartly not ducked it, but sort of deviated it. He said we were prepared for it
Hmm.
if the need be. And that was the headline that everybody carried. The next day, all papers had that headline. We broke the story. So if that was a big change. Earlier, a military chief would have sort of ducked it, said something else. But to say that, yeah, if required, we were prepared for it. That's sort of set the tone for the kind of discourse our military leadership is going to have. And since then, you've had many statements, I think, by our military chiefs. Not just military chiefs, even commanders at lower levels, who openly sort of, and just not shied away from saying that, yeah, we'll deal with it. So that is a big change, which we've seen in mindset of how the military is thinking.
Right. We'll talk more about this, but after a quick break.
The Afghans actually feel very betrayed by India. And why I'm saying this is because I came across an online petition. It was started by an Afghan student who has described how there are over 2,500 Afghan students who are enrolled in Indian colleges and universities, but who have been stuck in Afghanistan since the Taliban invasion, because India has still not resumed issuing visas to Afghan nationals. And these students have lost 2 years of their academic life. And many of them say that they considered India as one country that would always stand by them. But because of what's happened with them, they actually feel quite betrayed. So how do you see India's pretty stubborn stance here?
A lot maybe that India could have done in proactively getting people out of Kabul once flight services resumed between Kabul and Delhi. But the fact also is that in the initial periods, what happened was that there were only stamped visas that were allowed, and the company or the vendor that used to issue
Okay.
visas, there was a theft. And that theft led to India understanding that this could be all those elements, pro-Taliban elements also who could enter India because they had access to these visas. So then India cancelled all stamped visas. And in that, unfortunately, there were many Afghans who have stood by India, spoken about India Afghanistan friendship, were part of the administration that was ousted because that administration really took on the Taliban. And then slowly, what happened was that the Ministry of Home Affairs and the Ministry of External Affairs, working together, then announced e-visas. But e-visas also for them to issue e-visas has become a very cumbersome process because they don't have people on the ground.
So Abhishek, we talking about a story you did this week about the Indian Air Force. One of Indian Air Force's airbase in Ladakh, they are turning that into a fighter base. It exists right now as an operational, logistics base.
Yeah, I mean,
basically,
it's a base.
for
It's
transport
a
jet,
landing ground where
Yeah.
you can have transport aircraft.
yeah, and helicopters,
Yeah.
obviously. But they now want to bring fighter jets, and this would be around 40 to 50 kilometers away from the LAC.
Yes. And 13,700 feet.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if
1,000%.
this is going to be the highest fighter air base. in the
Highest
country.
is which one?
I think it will be.
Highest is
The DBO is, but it's not a fighter base.
हाँ right.
Yeah.
So अभी highest कहाँ पर है? देखना पड़ेगा.
Maybe Leh.
Leh, हाँ, I
Maybe
think Leh.
10,000,
maybe
11,000 feet. Yeah.
It also requires a lot of, I think, changes in the training. As in, I'll give some context to our listeners and viewers actually. So what we were discussing earlier, ki how I keep coming across reports from the last 3 years of things being sent and things being built in the LAC, and all of them have a sort of sense of permanence to it. कि ये तो बन रहा है और ये ही रहेगा. It's not like temporary because of the standoff. Yes, extra troops, extra equipment is being sent that will eventually come back. The idea is ki, like you said, this base is being converted into a fighter jet base, will remain all the time. Now, I know there are obviously in military there are always exercises, there are practices for such events, but it's a different ballgame altogether for something like this to be there 24/7, 365 days a year. So, abhi to, of course, because of the training that they have, because of the exercise that they've done, they're probably being able to manage and figure out. But do you think at the lower level and in the long run, there will be a change in the overall training structure as well to ensure that you have pilots and soldiers trained to stay in
I
these
don't think
places
that's
all
a
the time?
problem. I
Or
don't think
it's not a
that's.
problem?
I don't think that's a problem. You might have to tweak your
Acha.
SOPs, of course,
Okay.
on how you will operate at 13,700 feet
Yeah.
vis-a-vis, say, in Ambala.
Yeah.
So yeah, you will have those changes in the way you function, but I don't think it should be a problem.
Yeah.
Or it's not something. I think the creation of the asset
Hmm.
is more of a challenge
Then-
than the personnel,
Okay.
operating
Huh.
once it's ready.
Yeah.
And on a lighter note, I think what it will do is that it will not have fighter jets being filmed by us in their exercises, because when
Yeah.
we were in Leh, so the Leh field, and it's a small town, so from the terrace of the hotel, you have a very clear view of the airfield.
Okay.
And sorties would begin early morning.
Hmm.
And I have not seen, it was an overdose of seeing fighter aircraft flying.
Okay.
They would end by around midday and start again, sometimes even at night. So I have not seen so up close fighter jet operation. It was almost as if you were at the airfield. You could see the takeoff, you could see the landing. So much so that the Air Force at that time had to send, first they sent an advisory quote unquote, that media houses, journalists are advised not to be showing all of this because these are operational things. Since it was advisory, I think nobody cared much about it. And then there was a diktat, and it had a line that anybody violating this could be criminally charged as well.
Wow.
Then it was taken a bit seriously for about a day or two.
Wow.
And our military is liberal towards us journalists, I think. Yeah.
Nice.
Had it been Pakistan, I don't think this was possible.
Oh, yeah.
So about 48 hours, I think that diktat worked. And then it all changed. In fact, we were a little later, and that's the joke, maybe a couple of days or 3 days later, we were inside the Leh airbase, shooting everything,
Yeah.
officially.
Wow.
So they said ki chalo yaar, tum andar aake hi kar lo jo karna hai. Don't do it from outside. Because I don't know. I mean, I think there is a feeling that if you guys do it, civilians will also start doing it.
Mm.
And it doesn't make much sense actually. What these military logics are sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. So if they do it, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, we were inside the Leh base, covering everything.
Hmm.
Transport aircraft, fighter jets, speaking to pilots, everything.
To extend.
So I think, on a lighter note,
Yeah.
so being in Nyoma, which is further ahead, much further ahead, I think journalists will not have the luxury to be there the way we had the luxury to be in Leh.
And, to continue a lighter note and to extend your Pakistan joke a little, and again, different go on a
In China,
tangent
of course, it won't be possible
at
either.
all. But and go on a tangent. In Pakistan, you can be a World Cup winning captain, but not feature in a film released by your cricket board, recalling the heroes of your country's
Really?
cricket. Oh, you haven't seen this controversy?
There was some film on.
So the PCB, the Pakistan Cricket Board, I think yesterday or the day before, released a clip recalling the heroes of Pakistani cricket over the years, and Imran Khan was not in it. Wasim Akram has tweeted about it a few hours ago, saying he just caught it. He was on flights, etc. He just saw it and he was like, what is this? So he said the PCB must say sorry and take the clip back immediately. So that also happened.
Yeah, and it shows the kind of impact politics has on sport. And people say that sport has nothing to do with politics. Is the most vague line I have always heard. It shouldn't have, should be the the line, but it doesn't have is, of course, it has a lot to do with politics and sports.
Anyway, that was that's anyways not the topic, and it's just one of the tangents we keep going on these episodes. Coming back to what we were discussing, so when you say 40-50 kilometers away from the LSE, just like struck me. How often have we talked about how difficult it is to patrol those areas because no one agrees on where the LSE is? Like, it's like, we've said this previously as well. The problem is that no one's agreeing what the problem is. India says, I can patrol till here. China says, no, I can patrol till further than that. And that's where we are stuck.
That's why face-offs happened.
That's why Galwan happened, etc. We all know that. And, in our previous episodes, we'll have a link to a couple of them in the description. Abhishek has quite nicely captured the difference between an LOC and LSE by saying the LOC physically exists. After being on paper, it has literally been turned into a sort of a wall or a barbed wire fence, at least.
At least in some places.
In some places, because of the infiltration.
And that fence, again reiterating it, the fence is not the LOC. The fence is actually ahead of the LOC.
Yeah, you've told me.
Which India has put up.
Yeah.
Saying that...
That's the last line until which will permit somebody to keep walking. Uske aage aaya to fir there will be shots fired. With the LSE, I couldn't confirm, but I think the most I'll imagine is that there'll be a jhanda somewhere or a stick somewhere. This is until where we patrol. Only as a reference for your own soldiers. Don't cross this line because historically, if we have crossed...
I've had some generals who've served give two kinds of explanations. Yes. And that itself shows how confusing this entire problem is. So there are people who've said that, there is a perception problem with the LSE, things like that. And there are some who said that as a commander, I made sure that there's no confusion. I would tell my troops, this is the LSE. You have to, this is our perception, so I'll tell my troops. In the army, how can you tell that, no, there's a problem of perception? That's for political leadership to, think about. But the troop on the ground has to be told one thing. But ye hai ya nahi hai?
True.
So I kind of agreed with it. But you can't be confusing your troop on the ground.
Yeah.
as a commander, you might know it that there's a perception problem, but that
Mm.
can't be the message that you'll send to your
Yeah.
man on the ground whose job is to guard it.
Got it. Exactly.
So yes, there is a perception problem, but it's interesting how what your troops are briefed.
Mm.
I think most of the commanders will tell their troops that be clear, this is the LAC.
Yeah.
And so what I was coming to is that's why clashes happen. That's
Mm.
why face-offs happen.
Yeah.
Because you came face to face and then there was a disagreement. Many times they went back.
Yeah.
But whenever a clash happened, it was because of that problem that no, this is mine,
Mm.
you go back, you go
You
back.
go back and no one
And
goes
then something
back, and
happens, somebody throws a
fisticuffs
stone,
and,
somebody abuses, somebody says something, and tempers
Yeah.
flare up.
Yeah.
This is the classic case of an India-China.
face
face
off
off.
and then standoff and face off and
Fine.
then whatever.
So this is the classic
Yeah.
case. Now what has been happening is that because you are not going up to those places because of this kind of an disengagement
Yeah. And to ensure
protocol
like, there's no
that you've
violence.
pulled back and things like that, and patrolling, as I said earlier when we were talking, that Indian Army is not patrolling some of the patrol points. They're not going up to that. There are 65 patrol points. Out of that, 25, 26 odd are just out of bounds. You're not going up to those places. So if the patrolling is not happening, if you're not going there, the face-offs will not happen. A face-off from a tactical military point of view is not a bad thing.
Yeah. That means that, at least
That
you're
means
going
you're reaching there, you're
Yeah.
going there, you're claiming.
Yeah.
If you stop claiming, if you stop going there, that's how status quo changes. That is what China's salami slicing
Yeah.
is, which General Rawat had referred to.
Mm.
But it's very important to understand that if a face-off has happened, it's a good thing.
That's a good example you gave. So where I was going at earlier, if the LAC is so confusing, so difficult to figure out on land, what happens in air? Because, let's go to Balakot. Balakot strikes happened, Air Force was on alert, Pakistan the next day morning sent a bunch of its aircraft. I'm pretty sure every pilot or every ATC on both sides had some sort of a marker on their screens which said ki ye line hai. If they cross this side or you cross that side,
Yeah.
it's a and that's probably how back then Wing Commander Abhinandan Varthaman ended up being hands the Pakistani military. What happens in the China region? अगर आप जमीन पे decide नहीं कर पा
Yeah,
रहे
so
हो
you
तो
can
हवा में
imagine the
क्या
kind
होगा?
of confusion that is there. And that, all the more reason it's important to have fighter air bases closer to what the LAC is.
Yeah, but now तो I'm thinking कि this could a fight.
Because see, no, if you don't have fighter air bases closer to these places, it becomes a problem in the sense that as you take off, you can at least claim that this is my fighter base. It's legitimate for me to take off and
that's a
land.
good point. Oh, that's a very good
At
point.
least to take off and land from here, it's my base. So if you don't have these bases,
Yeah.
then imagine the
That's a good
confusion and the
point.
problem.
It's a good point. But something I'm wondering now, and I hope that doesn't happen, but this actually also has a potential to, like you had a clash on ground, to have a clash in the air. Because if you have differing perceptions on the ground, a differing perception in the air, with just a simple
No, forget about perception. See, if there is an escalation on the ground, you can always expect air power to be used.
Yeah, but what I'm thinking right now is, what if there's a perception that the Chinese Air Force, for example, has crossed over into Indian territory?
So it's happened. That's what I'm saying.
What do you do then?
So
You send your own
we
Air
also
Force.
scrambled our jets.
Hmm.
It's just that force was not used.
Man, this is tense stuff.
So it's happened. It's already happened.
Wow.
Yeah. But off late it has stopped.
Achha.
Last few months.
Disengagement in the air as well.
Well, there has been no engagement in the air.
Nice way to put it.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it has happened, and I would say that there was no escalation.
Interesting. It's quite to think of it as a layman, quite a tensed up situation.
Yeah, I mean,
You've been there. I mean, you
it's
know
become
that,
a little normal now. I
Now,
think.
huh,
It's been normalized. The tension has been normalized
Hmm.
now,
right?
which again is something to ponder about. Do you want this to be normalized?
The normal, or do you
Like
want,
LOC, or you want a resolution? You want
Hmm.
to find how you can deal with it.
or like some face-offs here and there to like keep
I'm
reminding you,
saying,
keep
I'm
reminding
saying
you.
face-offs.
Bhai,
Of course, none of us want bloodshed.
bloodshed,
and things like
obviously,
that.
obviously.
But if face-offs are happening, it's a good message. But face-offs not happening. Maybe they are happening and we're not being
Not been
told.
told. Speaking of fair engagements, on Instagram at least, I don't know how active you are, but a producer and is. I come across these reels, okay, of US shot from inside US Air Force, or maybe US Navy planes. I'm not very sure which force, which wing. Of apparent communications between the US planes and Chinese planes, because US and China have also had some aerial, close calls, not really engagements per se, but you've had planes flying nearby, and these are official reports for Pentagon has sent, etc. But you have these reels and the pilots talking to each other aggressively, saying, this is my airspace, you better vacate, and the Chinese response saying,
they're real.
I don't know. That's what was going to come to you.
Okay, I have not seen. So
Achha, you have not seen. Achha. But does that happen, by the way? Like, on a kind of serious note as well, when pilots fly in the air to opposing countries, are they on the same frequencies, or are they able to talk to each other for stuff like this?
I don't know.
Nahin.
Getting into each other's communication system, I don't know if it's
Not systems per se, like talk to each, like on ground you have the commanders, you have the senior most officers talking, right? You have them saying ki this is an area until where I can patrol, please go back.
to sort of
To warn them, to kind of
conversation
say
with
ki
them.
this is my area, go back,
that's
something
possible.
like that.
Yeah, that's possible. I thought like you meant a filmy kind of thing.
वो reels में तो film present करते हैं.
You're being dead कि पीछे हट जाओ type पढ़ना ऐसे हो जाएगा, like border kind of film. I thought that's possible. Yeah.
वो reels में भी kind of filmy ही होता है, but इतना
अच्छा,
filmy नहीं.
okay.
It's the,
So I've not seen. Maybe you can share a few.
I will. And maybe in the next episode, Abhishek can tell us if these reels are any true or not. Because this is a legendary joke of, I forget which, but again, US and some, I think Russia, some US, some Russian warship trying to scare some what they thought was a US warship, ki go back, we are, otherwise whatever. And it turned out that the US warship was not a warship per se, but a lighting tower on shore. So basically saying we can't go back. If you keep sailing towards us, you'll hit us. But it turned out to be a joke. So these things do the rounds of the internet.
No, speaking of communications between militaries, so not a controversial one, but a very nice, sweet one, was when the Navy released, when the Rafales were coming in from France. So Navy released a small audio where one of the commanding officers of one of the ships sent a message to one of the pilots that welcome, you're flying over Indian waters now, and may you guys fly high, and may your aircraft always keep soaring. I think that was really cool and really nice.
Yeah, it was.
And it was something that's something that citizens would like to hear. And the way it was done, it was the language used, the tone and tenor of the naval officer. It just makes you feel good.
Yeah. Last thoughts on this. This is the broader China question, and we've asked this several times, and this time I think we'll also leave it open to our listeners and viewers if they want to come in with their thoughts on this. Because again, I still have this question that I don't seem to have an answer, and it's also kind of a territory for our producer Anna to explore on her own podcast. Is all of this requires so much money, so much spending on both sides, and we are doing it in response of what China did, and like we discussed earlier, some historical. We were behind China for a long time, so this was much needed. Why is China doing this? Like,
for that we need another 2 hours.
Yeah.
I don't.
But the
think
thing is, we don't have answers. I mean, like you said, it won't happen at the level of the core commanders. They have met 19 times, and I think even they themselves know this is it.
Of course.
There's some talk
it's
of
only to ensure that there are no further escalations.
Yeah. There's some talk of PM Modi and Xi Jinping meeting in the near
That's
future.
also right now it's very speculative.
Yeah, some talk. That's what I said. So some talk of it. And perhaps some people have said if they meet, perhaps something can be worked out. Though I'm a bit circumspect about that as well, because
I think, given that both the leaders are extremely influential in their respective countries, I think it's only appropriate for them to find a solution to this. I mean, the kind of stature that both of them have in either of the countries, I think something like this can only be sorted out if they sit on the table.
Yeah.
I think the problem is that if they sit on the table and then it doesn't work out,
then likely be a big hit to both their images.
I think that is what is the dilemma for both the countries.
And also the trust factor. I mean, even if you sit and thrash
there
out
is
an
no
agreement,
trust.
how do you have
See,
trust?
there is no trust. There is the trust deficit is extremely, extremely low. Be it at the military level or the diplomatic level. When it comes to the land dispute between India and China, there's absolutely no trust.
Right.
I don't know if there's more trust with Pakistan, maybe.
That's
seriously.
Considering the reiteration of the ceasefire that happened,
exactly. I'm talking about action on ground.
Has stayed.
The developments that have taken
Not a single
place.
violation, I think, has happened since then.
Yeah,
Maybe chota mota,
but nothing. Yeah.
Nothing. Yeah.
So we can only gauge by what we are seeing.
Yeah.
And now it's 2-3 years. It's not a matter of few months.
So considerable amount of time has passed for us to see that.
So there's absolutely no trust when it comes to China. People have told me, I've not had a single officer who's had a different view on this.
Achha.
It's anybody who's dealt with the
Serving
Chinese.
And retired both.
Anybody who's dealt with the Chinese, they are very clear that it's very difficult to read their mind. They say something, they do something, and then they go back and then they do something else. So it's a puzzle.
They say something, they do something, go back and do something else. It's a nice quote, quotable quote. Who gave it to you? I mean, you can't say real names, I'm guessing, but it's a nice one.
This is what I'm saying, just trying to explain.
Oh, this is you saying that.
Yeah, I'm not quoting.
We should record this.
Not quoting anyone.
We'll ask Anna to just cut this out separately and keep this as a record. Because
not quoting anybody, just the kind of sense
you get from
that
everything.
I've got.
Yeah. I think that's the best way to perhaps put it for China. And like I said to our viewers and listeners, we leave it open for some comments on whatever you think. Because the thing is, the reason I'm asking is that Abhishek and I have discussed China on I can't even count the number of episodes we on this podcast, and we've run out of different theories and speculation, even if they're speculative, to answer the question of why China is doing what it's doing. The straight answer is actually no one knows. We didn't know on day one of why it did. We are a bit more educated now. We can make a few more educated guesses, but they're still going to be guesses. So I'd like to see if there's any theory that we've missed. And if we have, then we'll talk about that on an upcoming episode. So, to all of you out there, let us know if you have any comments on this topic. And if you even generally want to tell us what you think of our episodes and our podcast, you can drop a text to us at 8588966996, or you can email us at pods@indiatoday.com. That's pods@indiatoday.com. Also, please drop us a rating on any of the podcast platforms you listen to us on, whether it's Apple Podcast, Google, or Spotify. A special thanks to our producer, Anna Priyadarshini, as always. And that's it. That's it for this week's Defense Dose. For more, tune in next week. Till then, stay safe and do not cross any boundaries without a passport.